What the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now Podcast.
Kind of a crazy story about something that happened with respect to artificial intelligence. Now, I should point out, we've heard stories like this before. Certainly I have, about lawyers who were, using AI to come up with information for court cases they were involved in. And then at the beginning, people don't check. You assume everything AI tells you is true. They found that, of course, it was not. Now, by the way, some of this doesn't have to do with, intentionally coming up with wrong information. But when you accept information that AI spits out, I think we all know better now that you want to double check that information. And obviously, when you're a lawyer bringing this in front of a judge, that would be a good time to make sure that it's all accurate. And it turns out there have been cases where it hasn't been. I think there are a couple of cases where lawyers have actually been disbarred from having done something like this and maybe found to have used it knowing that the information was wrong. But this case in Quebec, this is a bit different. This is the first time I've ever seen a judgment that says the Quebec court upheld the decision against this man, ordered him to pay an additional $5,000 fine over and above what he was originally sentenced with for the improper use of artificial intelligence. Ari Goldkind is a criminal lawyer and legal expert. He is in Toronto, I think, right, Ari?
Good to be with you. I am.
Nice to be with you. So listen, you're aware of this particular case. Now, and by the way, I should point out this whole case from beginning to end lasted over 5 or 6 years before we finally got to the point we're at now. What did you think when you saw this?
So it's a very good question, Aaron, because this is something that's talked about a lot in my business, and I think that there's going to be seismic changes. I think everybody who thinks AI is only coming for blue collar and factory workers are wrong. I think it's coming for the lawyers. I actually think it's coming for the doctors. So I was very interested in the story from the headline. Somebody gets fined $5,000, and just to make this clear to your listeners, for essentially giving a bunch of fake AI cases and citations to the court, okay? That struck me as very interesting because there is a movement now, and I know it's happening in Ontario, that if you're going to use AI, which so many people are using, Aaron, we're really not talking about how many students are using it and how many people writing exams. I mean, ChatGPT is like the new MSN Messenger, if you're old enough to know what that is. And it's really something that the courts have become aware of. So what's happening in the courts? The courts have made a decision now that if you're going to use artificial intelligence to write your materials or your submissions, you have to let the court know, okay? And I expect that to be a practice direction. That's a formal notice to the bar and to litigants that you have to let us know. You can't bluff it the way when you write your letters to your boss and use ChatGPT, you obviously don't tell them. The second thing that I thought was really interesting was the $5,000 fine. That caught my attention, and I thought to myself, but wait, there's more. And when you read the facts of the story, you really have a court imposing a $5,000 fine, and that is very rare in criminal court. It's very, very rare that a self-represented accused or any accused gets hit with a fine. As you read the story, as I'm sure you did, you notice that the judge was very critical of this man's behavior. He's essentially calling him somebody that the court can't trust, who has dragged this out, whose word is not their bond. And at the end of basically the reporting on this, you can clearly say that the court is sort of frustrated to wit's end. This is more than AI, and there's this belief that perhaps the AI that was all bad with fake cases, it was not an accident. Many people might have it as an accident, but I think that's the part that jumped out to me, that this was a court saying, nah, this isn't the average guy using ChatGPT. This is somebody trying to pull the wool over our eyes.
Exactly. Let me read just this last part here that you just referenced now. This is the judge's ruling. It says, while the court is sensitive to the fact that Mr. Laprad's intention was to defend himself to the best of his abilities using artificial intelligence, his conduct remains highly reprehensible. And he goes on to say he must bear alone all the, and I'm not sure what this word is, all the opprobrium resulting from quotations hallucinated by artificial intelligence on which he relied to generate his contestation.
I took that, Aaron, as he reaps what he sows. And I can tell you, for most of your listeners who do not move planes, remember, part of the charges here, he's moving planes and inflating planes, not cars, not automobiles, planes, the suggestion is that this is a person who really can't be trusted. Now, I think the broader question to your listenership is, look, what if you're a self-represented accused and you can't afford Ari Goldkind? You can't afford, very good Montreal lawyers. You can't afford a lawyer in Calgary. But you're going into court and using some AI or ChatGPT. First of all, let the court know, okay? Now, this is not legal advice. This is just my sense. Let the court know. I think that's going to become a rule within the next many months or a year. But this is an increasing problem, Aaron, to people representing themselves in court. And
let me stop you. Let me stop you for a second to ask why, though. Why do you think it's necessary for the court to know? If I'm citing case law, for example, right, or jurisprudence, what's the difference if I got it from AI or didn't if I checked it? Why does the court have to know?
I'll tell you why. Because there has been a rash of AI, and I don't think artificial intelligence is all that intelligent at times. I think it's the bane of the world, and I don't know why it's not being regulated, Aaron. And I'm a person not in favor of regulation, but this is not going to make the world a better place. What the courts have found is that AI is churning out quotes and citations that are not real and that are not true. And while I certainly think AI at times might do the job of judges, lawyers, maybe it gives better decisions at times because it's, theoretically not privy to human bias and all of that.
Right.
When you send the message to the court that you've used it, when you're a lawyer, Aaron, and I mean this very sincerely, I'm not being glib, there's an assumption that as a member of the bar, you're acting with the utmost of integrity, the utmost of ethics. You're not putting forward a case unless you know what the citation was, who the judges were, that it happened in Canada, and it's not nonsense spit out by a server in the middle of Idaho.
Okay.
So that's the reason that you do it, because it sort of sends a message. But again, so many people, particularly self-represented people, are going to go down this road that I think this is going to be an issue that we'll be talking about much more 6 months from now than we are now, because I think most people, when they have to do a closing submission in a case that they're charged with something, where's the first place they're going to go? ChatGPT.
Yeah. By the way, if I could just read some more here so people understand, it says the documents submitted to the court included 8 instances of non-existent citations, decisions not rendered, references without purpose, and inconsistent conclusions. So you can understand why the court made the decision that it made. It's interesting to point out, Ari, to what you just mentioned. This is not the justice system saying to the average person who either can't afford a lawyer or wants to represent him or herself, it's okay to use it, but you better know what you're doing. Fair?
That's why I thought, yes, and that's why I thought I should have very quickly made the point to your listeners that this isn't a 10 commandments of thou shalt not.
Right.
This was really about the thou that was in front of the court, and the court saying, we're tired of you, Mr. Thou. I made that up. But if you're like a litigant and you're in a custody battle or you have no money or you're charged with something, you can use it with some caution and some judiciousness, but it's not meant to be a substitute, although quite frankly, Aaron, and I'll end my answer here, the future is coming very, very quickly, and people are not going to like it.
Have you had, if I can ask, clients come to you and suggest that they did some preliminary work on AI and look what they found, and what do you think?
Well, that's a great question, and I know you have to go to break soon. I'll give you the answer that might make you chuckle. How many times have you fallen, hurt your knee, scraped a toe, you have a headache, and where do you immediately go? Dr. Google.
Right.
Dr. Google can be right, sometimes it can be wrong. Try being a defense lawyer, telling a client some honest information and then getting back, well, I Googled this, and you're wrong, Mr. Lawyer, who's done this for 25 years. Trust me, Aaron, those aren't fun conversations to have.
There you go, and happening more and more. Ari, appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Bringing you the breaking news and the people making it. Montreal Now with Aaron Rand. CJAD 800.
Time for us to check in with Dr. Joe Schwarcz, host of the Dr. Joe Show here on CJAD, Sundays at 3. He's also director of the McGill Office for Science and Society. And Joe, we're starting today with something that actually came up on the show the other day. My producer, Alice, brought up this idea of something called blue spirulina. Now, I've heard of spirulina before, but I did not know it's considered a superfood. That's how it's commonly referred to. So we said we were going to talk about this, and I know you have an issue here. What's the problem with spirulina, other than nothing is a superfood?
Okay. So I read the article that you guys sent me. It's about 850 words. It comes from a reasonably reputable source. It's a newsletter called Healthline, which I do look at, and it's pretty good. Anyway, what I did is I first counted the number of times the word may appeared in this short article, and the number of times the word suggest or possible or potential appeared. Well, there were 21 mays and 15 suggest, possible, or potential in this short article. Mm-hmm. These are what, in the sort of the skeptical world, we call weasel words, because for may, you can just as well substitute may not. The idea here is to create a positive impression without making a commitment. That's really what these weasel words are all about. For those people who don't know, spirulina is actually a type of bacteria. And sometimes they call it algae, which is technically incorrect. It really is a single-celled organism, and it's a bacterium. And it grows in lakes, it grows in ponds. Sometimes it is referred to as pond scum. It's this green sort of scum that you see on the surface of lakes. Now, it does have some nutrient qualities. It is pretty high in protein, but not in the amounts that people would consume. People would never consume this in significant enough amount so that it would give them a source of protein. I actually first became aware of this whole spirulina business, believe it or not, back in 1980 when I first wrote about it, because there was an article in the National Enquirer at that time suggesting that one of the amino acids, phenylalanine, which is present in spirulina, is good for weight loss, that it curbs the appetite. Well, of course, there was no evidence for that whatsoever. It was a marketing gimmick, and there were a lot of issues with that. Eventually, the companies that were selling it at the time were taken to task. There were lawsuits for false advertising, etc. And then spirulina was sort of under the radar for a while until the blue spirulina emerged. Now, spirulina is actually sort of a greenish, bluish color. The green is chlorophyll. That, of course, is the pigment that allows for photosynthesis. Now, if you remove the green pigment, if you remove that coloring, you have a blue pigment that is left behind. So that is what blue spirulina is. It is spirulina, which is only the blue coloring. It's called phycocyanin. So it is a pigment, and it does have a use. The use is in coloring, food coloring, because, today there's a lot of issues about the so-called synthetic or artificial food dyes, and replacement with natural dyes is desirable, and that's what blue spirulina can do. However, the health qualities of the amount of blue spirulina that you would have in any kind of food would be absolutely insignificant, because the amount of this blue coloring is essentially insignificant. It's a very potent blue color, so you don't need very much of this. So the fact that this pigment, the phycocyanin, actually has antioxidant properties, which it does, that's interesting academically, but not in the amount that you would encounter in your diet or in a capsule that you would take or in a pill that you would take. Now, indeed, when you scrutinize the scientific literature on spirulina, you will find all sorts of studies about improved cardiovascular health, about anti-diabetic potential, about possible reduction in neurological diseases. All of these are in vitro or animal studies, meaning in the lab or in animal. What we look for in science, of course, is the clinical trial, which means humans, which means having tried something on people and having shown that it has a benefit. Not a maybe, or not a suggest, or not a potential, not a possible, but it does have some sort of effect. That's what we look for. But when you look at the scientific literature on spirulina, you don't find that. You find some studies in the Petri dish. You find some studies in animals, which you cannot relate to people. People are not giant rats, and we are not giant test tubes. So we need the human clinical evidence. So when someone goes on the web and starts surfing to look for benefits of blue spirulina or blue-green algae, they will come upon all kinds of websites, many of them by multi-level marketers, which of course is a questionable thing in the first place, that will tout all kinds of benefits, and they will tell you that it will change your life, that your cholesterol will go down, your blood pressure will go down, you won't be diabetic anymore. But none of this is based on any kind of scientific research.
Okay.
So this is why, I always look for those weasel words, the maze and the potentials and the possible.
So, Joe, if I can just stop you then, you go ahead and do this, you buy this. Really, it's not going to hurt you. It's not necessarily, obviously, as you're outlining, going to help you very much because you can't take it in quantities that would. So you're just wasting money here? Is that the basic idea?
Yeah, I think so. You're just wasting money. There was at one time that Health Canada had to recall a number of these because there's a natural toxin that is present in algae called microcystine, which is pretty nasty stuff. But supposedly the marketers have learned to control for that. Okay. But at one time, Health Canada recalled a number of these products. But today, I don't think we really have to worry about that. It's not going to hurt you, except in the pocketbook, where it can hurt you very significantly.
Joe, I have 60 seconds. I saw a story this week. Beyond regular sugar-sweetened soft drinks, even now they're saying artificially sweetened soft drinks can cause liver disease. What's this about?
Right. This is another one of those studies that is based on looking at large-scale epidemiological trials where people fill out food frequency questionnaires over years, and then researchers look at these years later when their disease has manifested and see what the reaction is. And what they found is that people who are consuming any kind of soft drink, whether it's sugar-sweetened or artificially sweetened, is linked to liver problems. However, I think this is a classic reverse effect. I think here the story is that people who already have poor health are much more likely to resort to drinking an artificially sweetened beverage. I think it is quite unreasonable that both sugar or an artificial sweetener would have the same effect on the liver. I think that's not reasonable. So I think this is just one of these artifacts that comes out of scrutinizing the literature and looking for associations. And of course, an association never proves a cause and effect relationship.
Okay. By the way, does stevia count as a sweetener, as an artificial sweetener?
Yes, it does. It does.
Even though it's from a plant?
Yeah, it comes from a plant. Anything that is not sugar in terms of sweeteners is referred to as a sugar substitute. Now, sugar substitutes fall into different categories. I mean, stevia is a sugar substitute, even though it is not artificially made in the lab, whereas aspartame is a sugar substitute and it's artificially made. But whether it comes from a plant or comes from a lab is irrelevant in terms of its effect.
Okay, more bad news for me. All right, Dr. Joe, thank you so much. Appreciate it. You can check out Dr. Joe's show Sundays at 3 here on CJAD.
Introducing Bryan Adams Radio on iHeartRadio. Hosted by Bryan Adams himself.
Join me for an insider look on a wild ride through 40 years of global rock and roll.
Bryan Adams Radio. Now available on the free iHeartRadio app. Or ask your smart speaker to play Bryan Adams Radio on iHeartRadio.
Who's ready to rock?
Kids wanna ride. The very latest news, reported and discussed. Welcome back to Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
It is time to check in with Chris Dimakos, our CJAD 800 legal contributor. And Chris, interesting query today. So, EI benefits, right, in Canada are supposed to help employees who are out of work. Nothing new there. Problem, however, that you raise, are you eligible for EI benefits if you quit? What's the deal on this?
Right. So there's a general principle for EI benefits that if you lose your employment through no fault of your own, well, then you more than often are entitled to EI benefits. The problem happens when you quit or you resign, when you fill out your paperwork and you say, well, I'm the one that ended my employment, usually you get a big no. No, you're not entitled to it because you made a decision, the conscious decision to end your employment. What many people don't know is that there are provisions within the law that state that if you had to leave your job because of the circumstances from what you're working at, could be the poor conditions, it could be personality conflicts, it could have made work very difficult for you to keep attending. In those cases, much like a constructive dismissal, right? When you're forced to quit because the employer is pushing you out the door, in those cases, you are eligible to qualify for EI benefits. So what's important for everyone to know is if you're at a job right now, you haven't been fired, you just cannot continue going to work. It could be because of the way you're being treated. It could be because you're not getting paid. There could be a number of reasons that would justify you leaving that job. Well, in those cases, you would be eligible to qualify. When you fill out your paperwork for EI, there are spaces and there are paragraphs where you can explain why you left. And there's even reviews and appeals and a whole bunch of stuff that's there to make sure that you get what you're owed. But the main point I'm trying to make is just because you quit, because I've often heard that, well, if you quit, you lose all your benefits. The general rule is if you quit because you don't like your job or you just want to change, that's one thing. But not if you were forced out, not if you were forced to resign, much like a constructive dismissal. So it's important to make that distinction.
Okay, so I'm sensing as you say this, someone reacting by saying, well, I'll have to prove if it comes to this and I want to collect benefits that, in fact, I was forced out, when the employer is simply going to say, oh, no, we didn't force anybody out. He decided to leave on his own. Sounds to me like you're in for a bit of a legal hassle here.
So, again, your instincts are bang on. Yes, you're the one that's going to have the burden of proof if you resign. And that's why I always say before you do something, make sure, A, that you get the information you need, that you document it. It could be, for example, a conflict with your manager. It could be an uncomfortable conversation. There could be language used that caused you to want to leave there, that you were major name calling, or whatever it is. You have to document as much as possible what's going on. You have to communicate, whether it's with HR at your company, whether it's with your direct superior, whoever it is, any type of paper trail, any type of evidence you have that suggests what you're saying is true and actually happened, that goes a long way when you're trying to prove your case. And you're absolutely right about that. It's your burden of proof. So you have to be smart about this. Don't just decide on a whim, I'm going to resign here without taking the necessary precautions to make sure that if you do so, and your intent is to collect EI benefits, that you take the necessary steps before you leave, and you document why you're leaving, and you download or you copy or you forward any emails that would support your case in that context.
So, I mean, I'm sure you've had situations like this, right, where exactly what you're outlining now has come to fruition. What typically happens to employers at some point? Let's say you followed what you suggested, right? You've documented all these situations that have happened between the time you were told you have to leave or you decided to leave. Is it still a matter of, he said, she said when you end up in court if your employer decides to go after you? Or for the most part, do they simply say, you know what? Okay, we realize we're not going to win. He or she has documented all these things. Let's let it go.
Right. So there's two things here. The one is the he said, she said. You're absolutely right about that. And the best evidence that I look for when someone comes to see me about planning their case, I want to see evidence that's not subjective, that's not opinion, that's not someone's version of facts. I love an email that's written down that someone can read it and say, that email was sent. The words are those words that were used, and anyone can interpret them the way they want to interpret them. Or if you got a performance review, or if you have any type of documents that you can read and know that this is exactly what was done, this is what was said in those documents. There's very little, like you said, he said, she said, no, that's not what I said. I said this, and no, nobody recorded the conversation. It was just us two. So anytime you have this evidence that cannot be contradicted, those are the ones that carry the most weight. But again, I always tell this, the best cases, the ones where you get the strongest settlements, the ones where you have the least resistance, are the ones that are the best prepared. They say, like in hockey, the best saves are the ones that are made before the shooter even shoots the puck. It's the preparation that the goalie took to prepare himself for the shot. Well, the same thing in legal cases. The strongest cases are the ones that don't ever get to trial. They've been prepared properly, strategized properly, and when you show up and there's a meeting between both parties, one party says, you know what, there's very little to do here. Let's just try to mitigate how much exposure we have, and not whether or not we should try this case. Let's just try to limit the damage.
All right, I want to move on from that while we still have a minute to get into this case that you brought up. So a father hands over his multi-million-dollar business to his son for his son to run, and then the son makes a mistake. He fires an older employer who's been at the business, with the business for more than 35 years, by referring to him as, I'm quoting, old school mentality, and that's the reason he was let go. Employee files an unjust dismissal claim. What happens?
Well, he obviously wins. Not only does he wins and gets awarded above and beyond that 24-month max soft ceiling that we have in employment law. Well, the court went above and beyond that, and again, this goes back to preparation. What people should understand here is this new owner of the company, the son that was handed the company, decided to let the employee know and testify in court. Yes, we let them go because they were old school. They like to do things the old way, and I want to do things a new way, and that's why we let them go. Well, that doesn't bode well when you're trying to prove to the court that they can find other similar employment under the same conditions. If you're telling the court that this person is not employable anymore because they're old school mentality, that's not going to help you prove that they can get a job nice and quick and don't need much severance. You're shooting yourself in the foot, which goes back to preparation. Sometimes I see some of these cases and I'm like, how did this individual not know that testifying in this way is going to hurt his case? I'm not sure. They probably took it for granted. But again, the purpose of severance is to get you from your current job to your next employment. And sometimes that just is very, very difficult to foresee how much time it is. And in exceptional circumstances, the courts are going to say, you deserve the max and then some, because even your own employer said they have an old school mentality. It's going to be very hard for them to be employed by anybody because of that. So what people should take from this is understand exactly what the law says when you file a claim. Understand what you're trying to prove, and if when you prepare your case, make sure you're not testifying in a way that actually shoots yourself in the foot. Because
exactly.
I've seen it many times. Make sure understand what the objective is, and make sure that your evidence is in line with what your objective is.
Chris Dimakos, more helpful advice. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron.
Because you don't want to miss a thing. Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
You know, by now the Canadians open their home season tonight. Actually, doors just swung open at the Bell Centre. But you know what? The difference this year from last year, I guess, is last year when we made it through the first round of the playoffs or into the first round, a lot of people thought, hey, rebuilding process underway, probably better than expected. Now there's just, I guess, more optimism this year, given a couple of trades, given the fact that we end up with, Rookie of the Year in Lane Hutson, and the Canadians wasted very little time in signing him to a 7-year deal. Some people look at this and think this is good. Club's heading in the right direction. Then we found out today, both Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes, two of the main, I guess, if you will, executives who put this team together heading into the new season, got new contracts and raises, I guess, as well. But when I heard the story yesterday, my first reaction was Lane Hutson's 21 years old and had an amazing year, best defenseman in the NHL. I get all that. And now he's got a 7-year deal for $80 million. And it ended up we started talking about big business in sports. So I wanted to ask Eric Macramalla. We've spoken before. He's a sport legal analyst over at TSN about this deal. Eric, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. And let me ask about Lane Hutson first. Surprised by this deal, or perhaps by how easy it was to get done?
I was surprised that Lane Hutson signed for as little as he did. Well, the average annual value is $8.85 million, which is a lot of money for a lot of people. That's still below fair market value for a player like Lane Hutson, despite having played just one full season. If you look at the comparables in the NHL among other defensemen, he probably could have waited and secured a deal worth on average $9.25 million a year, if not higher. So $8.85 million represents a hometown discount. He knows that, but the Canadians have been really good. Ken Hughes and Court have been very good at getting players to take a little bit less to allow them cap flexibility to help build this team and turn it into a winner.
Talk about when you say hometown discount, meaning what exactly?
So Lane Hutson could have gotten more money. Had he really played hardball, he could have secured $9.25 million on average a year, if not a little bit more. But they're saying, look, you love playing in Montreal. We're building something special. But for us to have a chance to sustain success long term, we can't allocate a bunch of dollars to individual players at fair market value or even a little bit higher. This is why Suzuki took less, Caulfield took less. So this is why you're seeing some players take a little bit less in fair market value to give the team some flexibility. And so when you talk of a hometown discount, it's a player signs with the incumbent team for a little bit less, knowing that it's going to help the team win and sustain success long term.
My question would have been, I don't mean, tongue in cheek, but since when do agents care about that kind of stuff? They're out there to try to get the most money. If it means being traded to, I don't know, Minnesota or Utah, at the end of the day, it's $1 million over the next 7 years. That's a lot of money. So how does this keep entering into it?
It is a lot of money, and players have finite careers and finite earning potential. They've got to maximize their returns. You speak to any agent, they will tell you the most important person, Aaron, in a athlete's life is not his agent or his parents. It's his financial advisor. How do I maximize my return on investment? So, you've got to try and sign for as much as you possibly can. But I guess when you hit a certain number, you say to yourself, is there a significant difference? Will this really affect my lifestyle? But I know for sure it might affect my legacy and how happy I am as a competitive hockey player if we can't field the type of team that we want to field.
Well, you might argue that this is, perhaps the most storied NHL franchise, the Leafs, et cetera. Maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe we'll never know. I would ask the other question, which is that what came up yesterday as well. Yes, he could have got more, as you're suggesting, Eric, but look around other professional sports and guys of that caliber are signing for probably twice or three times the amount of money. Why is that in the NHL?
It's because player salaries are effectively predicated on the value of media deals. So the NFL, before the NFL sells a single ticket, they give each team a check for over $400 million off all the media deals. Their labor costs, including salary cap and benefits, is in the $200 million range. So they've turned a profit without even selling a season ticket. In the NBA, you have smaller rosters, and you have a massive media deal. So you can pay the players more. Of the four sports, the NHL is clearly the one that is not enjoying the same level of financial success as the other three leagues. Of course, it's a niche sport with tribal appeal. That's what the NHL is. They've signed some nice media deals, which is why the cap is going up $23 million over the next 3 years. But still, it's still hockey. And in southern states, it's like, what's hockey?
Well, we have a team in Florida, not just a team. We have a couple of teams. You have a Stanley Cup champion there, but you're suggesting that the impact just simply isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, it's how much are networks willing to pay a league to air their games? Right. So Amazon is paying the NFL $100 million for one Thursday night game, and they have 10 of those games. Right? The ratings are extremely, get a 25 share. Last season, the NHL playoffs, like the Cup finals between the Oilers and the Panthers, was getting like a 4 or 5 share in the U.S.
Got it.
So you're going to be paying a lot less for those games.
Yeah. Does this sort of change at some point? I mean, the NHL keeps talking about expansion. Who knows? Maybe European teams will be in there one day. Do you see it changing over the next few years?
I mean, it's changed a bit over the past couple of years. The NHL brokered a deal with Disney and ESPN and TNT, and that was a really big deal. So that's why you've seen the cap go up as quickly as it has. But if you're asking, does the NHL have a chance to displace the NFL and the Major League Baseball and the NBA? I think the answer probably is no. It's no, because those sports are embedded in U.S. culture in a way that hockey is not.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we could get to that level. I'm just wondering if we can get close. Yeah, exactly. So, but at least that's a big job, I think. Just
but Aaron, here's the thing. You know what? Like, we talk about this stuff, and I've got a radio show I talk to business and a lot of sports. I'm a big sports fan like you are. I see your Expos post. I'm still a massive Expos fan. There are times, aren't you sick and tired of acting like a shareholder? Let's just enjoy the games, right? Like, let's just enjoy it.
I guess, look, at the end of the day, I think to myself, I was saying this the other day because I'm a Yankee fan and obviously disappointed with what happened. And I look at that and I think those guys play 162 games a year. twice as many as guys in the NHL, and I understand it's embedded in American culture. I'm not comparing. I'm just wondering, a guy comes to Montreal, a hockey player, and if you are a hockey player and you want to play professionally, I imagine this is probably, at the pinnacle of where you could end up. As I said, Montreal, Toronto, maybe Boston, maybe would fit in there as well. And then at the end of the day, where you're suggesting that Lane Hutson could have got more money going to another market, he opted to stay here. And as you said, Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki did the same thing. So there's value, I guess, in being in this market. And obviously there's additional value in promotional work that you're going to do and money you take home that way. But it seems to me the Canadians have a huge advantage that way.
I mean, it's been a long time since I did my second degree at McGill, so I'll just speak loosely. I suspect that the incumbent team always has an advantage. But when you have free agents that are looking for a landing spot and want to make some serious money, they're taking three things, Aaron: taxes. Yeah. Florida, Nevada, Texas, Tennessee. I mean, those are no tax states, and it matters to players. When the Tampa Bay Lightning, when they pitch a free agent, I've seen it firsthand. The first page of the little brochure is the tax situation in the state of Florida. So it matters to players. But if you have a player who's young like Lane Hutson, he's just starting his second full season as a Montreal Canadian. He loves playing here. He's completely appreciated. He's validated here. It'll take a lot for him to leave. It'll take a lot for a guy like that to leave.
By the way, I don't want to kind of draw this picture up, but let's just say, because we know what happened with Carey Price, let's say something happens to Lane Hutson this year, next year, whatever else. What happens to that salary? Is that guaranteed money?
It is. Unlike the NFL, though in the NFL, your contracts are not guaranteed, but if you get hurt, they have to pay you. In the other three sports, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and the NHL, it's all guaranteed money. Now, the contracts are insured. So when it came to Carey Price's deal, of the $10.5 million, about 80% of that was covered by insurance. So when he was traded, the team that received him, it was the Schwarcz, they were only paying him $800,000 less the $10.5 and the bonus of the Canadians that paid him at $2.5 million. So you can get insurance to cover it, but you're bang on. Like, here's the thing. Lane Hutson has played 1 year in the NHL. He's been dynamic. He has had an historically great season for a rookie defenseman. No doubt about that. But the only certainty in sports is what? It's uncertainty. Yeah. So you cross your fingers and hope for the best.
I think about a movie I saw not that long ago. I don't know if you're old enough to remember. Do you remember who Mark Fidrich was?
I do not.
Okay. Pitcher for the Detroit Tigers. He came up when Detroit was going through a terrible time with auto strikes, etc. Kid came up. He used to talk to the baseball on the mound. He was an interesting character. He came up again at the age, I think, of 20 or 21 after having made the team in spring training. It was the biggest thing in baseball. Cover Sports Illustrated. 2 years later, he was out of the game.
I mean, talking to baseball, it's a situation where Bill Lee might say, hey, man, he's weird.
Even Bill Lee would say about Mark Fidrich he was weird, but in the best possible way, probably. Yeah. Eric Macramalla. Hey, listen, before I let you go, just real quick, I mentioned, the signings of Jeff Gorton, Kent Hughes. What'd you make of that?
It makes perfect sense. They, from day one, they want to build a team that is fast and that is skilled. And this season, we're seeing it. It's a very exciting time to be a Habs fan because this is a team that is now being constructed to sustain success long term. This is a very good hockey team, a team that can easily get 100 points this season. So extending those two guys makes perfect sense. They have done a very good job. When it's very hard, Aaron, to build a roster within the four narrow corners of the CBA because of the salary cap and the salary floor, it's very hard. Look at the Sabres and the Red Wings. They have done a great job.
We're all on board until they lose 3 in a row. Eric Macramalla.
Fire them. Fire them.
Someone's going to say it. Eric, thanks so much for the time. Always appreciate it.
This has been the Montreal Now Podcast.
Listen live on your radio, weekday afternoons from 2 to 6.
On CJAD 800.
Or through the iHeartRadio app.
The biggest songs in the world. You've heard them countless times. Now, learn the details of how they came to be. Join Ruby Carr for Encore, the stories behind the songs you love. New interviews and newly unearthed archive footage make for a fascinating weekly deep dive. Stream Encore, the stories behind the songs you love on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts.